Up tonight's top pundits, we have former Conservative MP Michael Fabricant. We also have the editor-at-large at the Mail newspaper, that is Charlotte Griffiths, Mail on Sunday, I should add, and television news legend Michael Crick. Michael Fabricant, good to see you. You're out of the Commons now, so you can be honest. You can say what you really...
Well, I am, and I always do with you.
You're very honest. What do you think about all this?
Well, look, first of all, this nonsense. I was shocked, actually, that even you, Charlotte, believe this nonsense, that they inherited a bad situation. First of all, we have the fastest-growing economy in the G7, and yes, there was a lot of debt per capita, but less than France, less than the United States, less than Italy. Actually, some would say that given the appalling situation that have happened with COVID, which affected the world economy, they actually came into a country where they could have actually done something. But you know why it's not working? Because when Labour got in 1997, it was New Labour. Tony Blair was not an old lefty. If you look at the cabinet now, you look at the sort of things that Keir Starmer says. He's an old lefty, a dud. He's someone who has come back from 30, 40 years ago when you thought the battle had been won, the battle of ideas, and it's not working. And they know it's not working. It's not working economically, but more importantly, it's not working with the British public.
Well, BBC, online, on radio, and on television has millions of consumers every week who are very happy with the product. Yep. Whether it's So I Got News for You, nature programmes, the news, all the rest of it. And I think the BBC is a fantastic brand. It's an asset. It has soft diplomatic power globally. And what a legacy, what a pedigree it's got. However, Hugh Edwards, rumours were circulating about his behaviour for years before the story broke. And why, if Gregg Wallace was speaking inappropriately to female colleagues in 27, then warned about it a year later again by the same broadcaster, why wasn't he fired?
Yeah, I know that the BBC did not handle the Hugh Edwards case and doesn't appear to have handled this case well. But the other broadcasters, in the case of Russell Brand, and there are problems in ITV as well, they haven't always handled it either. People don't handle these problems very well, and it's not just a broadcasting... I mean, we see it in politics too.
But don't you think there's a systemic problem?
Yeah, Michael.
I just think, I take a lot of what you say and understand what you say, but I think there's a systemic problem within the corporation. It tries to defend, quite rightly, its employees and people whom are working under contract for the BBC.
And let's Gary Lineker call the October the 7th attacks the Hamas thing.
Yeah, and, if you're going to mention other people, of course, Jimmy Savile. You would have thought the BBC would have set up better structures. They've got a very good HR department for the defence of people who work for the BBC, quite rightly, quite properly. Yeah. But, they also have to defend other contributors.
Charlotte, you have a capacious knowledge of the world of entertainment, so what is your thought on this?
I think there is a systemic problem, but I think it's more the culture of production companies. I slightly agree with you, actually, because they use production companies with very transient levels of staff paid very badly. So when Gregg Wallace says it's only middle-class people, that's because they're the ones with power and can afford to speak up. So in Emma Kennedy's case, she spoke up for a much younger production assistant who was in her 20s. She didn't have the power to stick up for herself. She was a freelance working for a production company who might have lost her job if she said anything. So I actually think this is to do with the way that the freelance production company structure works. And they need, with Banjay Media, which looked after MasterChef...
But that didn't apply when it came to Hugh... Hugh Edwards. It didn't apply certainly to Jimmy Savile, because in those days it wasn't contracted out. But I think there is still a major problem in the corporation which hasn't been properly addressed by the board.
There's a major problem in Parliament. We've discussed that on numerous occasions. I suspect there's been, in the 40 years of the Mail on Sunday or the 120 years at the Daily Mail, there have been problems as well. You may not know about them. They may have been before your time.
Sorry. Behave badly.
No,
oh, no, of course not.
What I'm going to do is we're going to restart this at 10:30 with the papers, because the Gregg Wallace story is all over the front pages, so we'll come straight back to it. And Michael can say anything he likes about the BBC or GB News, because that's what this programme is all about. And is Michael right? Am I BBC bashing? Is this opportunism just to criticise our national state broadcaster? OK, folks, well, look, there is only one story in town. It is Gregg Wallace. And do you think, Michael Crick, that actually other quarters of the media are using this story as a chance to attack the BBC, including the Murdoch-owned Sun newspaper with the headline, "Shut your cake hole, Greg"?
Of course. I mean, they do this all the time and have got commercial reasons to do so. It's no secret that Rupert Murdoch's no fan of the BBC. I don't suppose the headlines are directed, you know, I don't suppose... Well, occasionally, well, there was a time when he used to write headlines in The Sun himself. It's now more his son Lachlan who is the power within the business. But, and not just the Murdoch papers, I mean, the Mail papers as well occasionally take...
Is that fair, Charlotte?
Well, this news, the front of the Sun doesn't actually talk about the BBC at all. It just says, "Shut your cake hole, Greg," and
But of course, they're all over this because it's a BBC star, just as they were all over Hugh Edwards.
Yeah, but also
you know,
Phil
do papers
Schofield.
like the Sun and the Mail, do they have an agenda against the BBC?
Look, I think they want to advocate for people who paid their money for a service, you know? And the thing is about the BBC is we pay, as you said earlier, £174, is it going to be next year?
And 50p.
And
50p is for Gary Lineker's gold cufflinks, by the way.
Well, newspapers are in the business, especially my newspaper, of holding people like this to account if they're going to take our money and provide a service that we don't really have any rights over, except to expect, you know, a proper quality of behaviour.
But, you know, when I used to work for Channel 4 and for ITN, who also produce the ITV news, often the BBC would do something and the press would be all over them and it would be an outrage. And then you discover that ITN had done something, you know, even worse or an even bigger example of this, or Channel 4 News had, and we would get hardly any criticism whatsoever.
The Mail went after Phil Schofield.
Oh, yeah.
And that was very thoroughly executed. And it was ITV.
But, Michael, are you saying that we mustn't ever criticise the holier-than-thou?
No, of course not.
On the Sermon of the Mount, the Ivory Tower?
I frequently criticise the BBC on Twitter, but I think you've got to do it you've got to ask yourself, what is the motivation here? Is it because I think the BBC has behaved badly and wrongly here and therefore they deserve criticism, or is it because they're competitors?
Well, are you saying then that they haven't behaved badly and wrongly?
Sorry?
Are you saying they haven't behaved badly and wrongly?
No, I'm not saying they haven't behaved badly and wrongly.
Are you saying that they have learned lessons from Jimmy Savile
both
onwards?
Mark and Jacob Rees-Mogg, whose programmes I do regularly, you know, often come out with an anti-BBC item, and it gets rather repetitive. You know, do you come out with lots of... I mean, maybe I wasn't there those nights that you came out with an anti-ITN item,
well, I was
anti-Channel 4 item, or anti-Sky item.
I was pretty hard on ITV during the Philip Schofield.
But of course, they're competitors too.
True. I mean, I'm open to your criticism of my criticisms, but I mean, certainly when it comes to the BBC's shows like Have I Got News for You, where it appears to be a crime to be on the right politically, Question Time feels like an echo chamber.
Well, that is a criticism with which I would agree. And indeed, I gave a lecture about exactly that issue in Oxford a few years ago. So, and I've been, you know, worried about bias to the left within both the BBC and Channel 4 for some years now. I mean, I think in your case, it's even worse to the right, and I've said that too.
I'm just balancing
I think the last time I said it, I wasn't on air here for another 4 months.
No,
but,
well, you'd never get cancelled.